The auction closed. Only the horny alien girl was left, until one human made her his own. The auction hall of Proxima Station hummed with anticipation, holographic displays showcasing the day's exotic acquisitions in rotating three-dimensional glory. Tessa stood motionless on the final platform, her luminous lavender skin catching the artificial light. Unlike the other merchandise, she refused to pose or smile. Her silver blue eyes, eerily similar to human eyes but with vertical pupils, surveyed the crowd with quiet defiance. "Lot 47, announced the auctioneer, a corpulent Valaxian with translucent skin revealing the outline of 3 hearts. A female Lysithian, rare specimen indeed. Observe the physiological compatibility with humanoid species, the exceptional pigmentation. Estimated age equivalent to human mid-20s. Tessa's delicate hands clenched at her sides, her slender figure draped in the standard auction garment, a simple white shift that did little to conceal her curves. The 2 small bioluminescent marks on her cheekbones pulsed with her quickening heartbeat, betraying her anxiety despite her composed expression. "Bidding starts at 50,000 credits, the auctioneer continued, his voice echoing through the circular chamber. Silence followed. The crowd of traders, collectors, and wealthy eccentrics shifted uncomfortably. 40,000, the auctioneer suggested, his middle heart visibly accelerating through his transparent chest. More silence. Tessa felt the familiar ache of rejection mingled with relief. This was her 3rd auction. Twice before, potential buyers had backed away after learning of her telepathic sensitivity, an ability she couldn't fully control. She could feel their desires, their intentions, sometimes even before they formed conscious thoughts. 30,000? She's in perfect health? Minor telepathic abilities? Compatible biochemistry? A murmur rippled through the audience. Telepaths were valuable but unpredictable. Many collectors preferred more docile acquisitions. 25,000 final offer. The auctioneer's voice had lost its enthusiasm. 30,000, came a clear voice from the back. Heads turned. A human man stepped forward, his dark skin contrasting with the silver gray of his fitted jacket. He moved with the easy confidence of someone familiar with the station's underbelly. Nadim Rahal, the auctioneer acknowledged, surprise evident in his tone. The trader becomes a buyer today? Nadim approached the platform, ignoring the whispers. Tessa tensed as he drew near, instinctively reaching out with her senses. Unlike the predatory desires or clinical curiosity she usually encountered, his mind felt guarded, yet somehow warm. 30,000, Nadim repeated, his eyes meeting Tessa's directly. Transfer authorized. The auctioneer hesitated only briefly before bringing down his gavel. Sold to Nadim Rahal. As the crowd dispersed, Tessa was escorted to the preparation room where ownership chips were typically embedded. Nadim waited there, dismissing the technician with a wave of his hand. I've submitted alternative documentation, he explained, to the confused staff member. Private registration? When they were alone, Tessa spoke for the first time, her voice musical yet firm. I won't be obedient. Whatever you're expecting... I expect nothing, Nadim interrupted, his voice low. Except perhaps conversation during a long journey. Tessa's bioluminescent marks flickered with confusion. You spent 30,000 credits for conversation? A smile touched the corner of Nadim's mouth. I spent 30,000 credits for your freedom, Tessa of Lysith. The conversation is optional. He extended his hand, not to grab or command, but in a gesture of partnership. My ship leaves in 30 minutes. You're welcome to board as my guest, or you can walk out that service corridor and disappear. The choice is yours. Tessa stared at his outstretched hand, sensing no deception, but still wary. Why would you do this? Nadim's expression darkened momentarily, Let's just say I know what it's like to be seen as property. He glanced at the door. 29 minutes now. What will it be? The Artemis slipped into hyperspace with a gentle shudder, stars stretching into luminous ribbons beyond the viewport. Tessa stood transfixed by the sight. Her lavender fingers splayed against the transparent aluminum as if trying to touch the cosmos itself. First time seeing a jump? Nadim asked, securing the navigation controls before rising from the pilot's seat. First time seeing it from this perspective, Tessa replied. Transport ships for auctions don't exactly offer scenic views. The small freighter's interior was surprisingly comfortable, lived in rather than luxurious. Star charts covered one wall, while the other displayed an eclectic collection of artifacts from dozens of worlds. A Jovian wine chime tinkled softly near the environmental controls. I've programmed a course for the Callisto Drift, Nadim explained, moving to a compact kitchenette. It's 3 days away. Neutral territory, minimal alliance presence. Tessa turned from the viewport, her silver blue eyes studying him intently. You still haven't told me why you did this. 30,000 credits is a significant investment for a stranger's freedom. Nadim poured 2 cups of steaming liquid, offering one to Tessa. Cardassian tea, non-intoxicating, but it helps with the post-jump disorientation. She accepted the cup cautiously, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with unasked questions. I'm a trader, not a philanthropist, Nadim finally admitted, leaning against the bulkhead. But I specialize in rare items that need to be moved quietly. Having a Lysithian partner with telepathic abilities would be advantageous. Partner? Tessa's vertical pupils dilated slightly. Not property? I don't believe in ownership of sentient beings, Nadim said firmly. The documentation I filed lists you as a contractor. If our arrangement proves unsatisfactory, we part. Ways at Callisto with no obligations. Tessa sipped the tea, finding its bittersweet flavor oddly comforting. And if someone recognizes me as auction merchandise without an ownership chip, then my documentation shows I paid for exclusive employment rights through legal channels. Nadim's expression hardened. I've navigated Alliance bureaucracy for 15 years. The paperwork is impeccable. The ship's communication panel chimed, suddenly, startling them both. Nadim checked the display and swore under his breath. Proximity alert. Alliance patrol vessel requesting identification. He moved quickly to the controls. Standard procedure, but their timing is unfortunate. Tessa set down her cup, anxiety flaring. Will they board us? Unlikely, but not impossible. Nadim began transmitting clearance codes. If they do, remember, you're my navigation specialist. We met on Proxima Station through mutual business contacts. The patrol ship's holographic insignia appeared above the console, a stylized eagle clutching a cluster of stars. Artemis, this is Alliance Patrol Valkyrie, came a clipped voice. Your departure vector from Proxima is flagged for secondary. Verification. Prepare for remote scan. Nadim maintained his composure, but Tessa sensed his concern. Acknowledged, Valkyrie. Transmitting manifests now. He muted the communication and turned to Tessa. They're looking for contraband, not people. Stay calm and... They're suspicious, Tessa interrupted, her markings pulsing rapidly as she focused her telepathic senses toward the patrol ship. The officer believes your manifest is too clean. He's considering a boarding inspection. Nadim's eyes widened slightly. You can sense that from here? Proximity amplifies my abilities, she explained. I can project as well as receive. Understanding dawned on Nadim's face. Can you influence his decision? Tessa hesitated. Not control, but I can suggest. Make him less interested in us. Her eyes met his. But using my abilities this way has consequences. It drains me physically. I wouldn't ask if... I know, she said simply. I can sense your intentions. Taking a deep breath, Tessa closed her eyes. The bioluminescent marks on her cheekbones brightened to an intense blue glow. Minutes passed in tense silence before the communication panel chimed again. Artemis, your documentation appears in order, the patrol officer announced, his voice notably less interested than before. Continue on your registered flight path. Valkyrie out. The patrol ship's engines flared as it banked away. Tessa opened her eyes, swaying slightly on her feet. Nadim caught her elbow to steady her. Thank you, he said quietly. Are you all right? I will be. Her skin had paled to a softer lilac, her markings now dimly pulsing. It's just energy expenditure. Nadim guided her to a cushioned bench. Rest. I'll set up quarters for you. As he turned to leave, Tessa caught his wrist. Her touch was cool against his skin. I sensed something else from the patrol ship. They've been alerted about a Lysithian female missing from auction records. They weren't looking for me specifically, but the alert is active. Nadim's expression remained calm, but Tessa felt his pulse quicken beneath her fingers. Then we'll need to be more careful than I thought. We? Tessa echoed, her silver blue eyes searching his. Yes, we, Nadim confirmed. I made my choice back on Proxima. Unless you've changed yours? A faint smile curved Tessa's lips. Not yet, though your honesty about wanting to use my abilities for business is refreshing. I prefer transparency between partners, Nadim said, gently freeing his wrist from her grasp. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss what a fair partnership looks like, for both of us. As Nadim left for the cockpit, Tessa leaned back against the bulkhead, watching hyperspace dance beyond the viewport. For the first time in years, possibility stretched before her like the endless cosmos, beautiful, dangerous, and entirely unexplored. The wilderness of Callisto Drift spread beneath the Artemis like a watercolor painting, vast purple marshlands interspersed with crystalline formations that caught the light of twin suns. Nadim guided the ship toward a small settlement, barely visible on the horizon, a cluster of domed structures nestled against a towering cliff face. Refuge outpost, he explained as they began their descent. Originally a mining colony until the ore ran out. Now it's home to those who prefer to exist beyond Alliance jurisdiction. Tessa stood beside him in the cockpit, closer than she would have allowed 3 days ago. The journey had established a cautious rhythm between them, professional discussions of trading routes by day, personal stories shared over evening meals. She'd learned of his childhood on water-scarce Nefaria, how he'd worked his way from cargo loader to independent trader. He'd listened as she described Lysith's floating cities and the circumstances that had led to her capture by traffickers. Will we be safe here? She asked, her silver blue eyes tracking the settlement's approaching details. Safe enough, Nadim replied, his hands dancing across the controls. I have contacts here, people who owe me favors, and Refuge operates on a strict non-interference policy. The ship settled onto a landing pad with a gentle thud. Nadim powered down the engines and turned to Tessa. There's something we need to discuss before we disembark. She tensed slightly, her bioluminescent markings flickering. Relax, he said with a small smile. I just need to know your comfort level with continuing our arrangement. The Alliance alert about you has spread. Working with me carries risks. Tessa studied him for a moment, her telepathic senses lightly brushing his consciousness. His concern was genuine, his motives complex, but not malicious. I've spent enough time in your mind to know you're not planning to betray me, she said finally. And I've nowhere else to go. For now, our partnership serves us both. Relief flickered across Nadim's features. Good. Then there's someone here I'd like you to meet. The marketplace of refuge hummed with activity, a chaotic blend of species and cultures. Merchants hawked wares from a dozen worlds, while patrons bartered in a cacophony of languages. Tessa stayed close to Nadim, her senses overwhelmed by the press of so many minds. He led her to a small shop tucked between larger establishments, its entrance marked by hanging chimes crafted from iridescent shells. An elderly human woman with intricate facial tattoos looked up from a workbench as they entered. "Nadim Rahal," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic. "It's been 3 cycles since you darkened my doorway." "Hello, Jamila," Nadim replied warmly. "I brought someone who needs your expertise." The old woman's eyes, milky with cataracts yet somehow piercing, settled on Tessa. "A Lysithian. Remarkable. I haven't seen one of your kind in decades." Tessa felt no threat from the woman's appraisal, only genuine curiosity. "Jamila specializes in identity modification," Nadim explained. "Both physical and digital." Understanding dawned on Tessa. "You want to change my appearance?" "Just enough. To confuse facial recognition algorithms," Jamila interjected, approaching Tessa with a scanner, "and perhaps suppress those lovely markings when necessary." "They're bioluminescent," Tessa said, "connected to my emotional and telepathic state. I can't simply turn them off." Jamila's wrinkled face crinkled with amusement. "Child, there's very little I cannot modify with the right materials." She turned to Nadim. "It will cost you, of course." "I've brought payment," he replied, producing a small case from his jacket. "Venusian amber, as requested." While Jamila examined the amber, Tessa pulled Nadim aside. "Are you certain this is necessary?" "The alliance is thorough," he said quietly. "And I have a potentially lucrative trading opportunity here, one that would benefit from your abilities. But first, we need to ensure you won't be recognized." Before Tessa could respond, a deafening explosion shook the building. Merchandise crashed to the floor as dust rained from the ceiling. Nadim instinctively pulled Tessa against him, shielding her as a second blast followed. "Raiders!" Jamila hissed, slamming her shutters closed. "They come when supply ships arrive, looking for easy targets." Through the window, Tessa glimpsed masked figures moving through the marketplace, firing indiscriminately. Panic flooded her senses as terrified minds screamed in unison. "We need to get back to the ship," Nadim said, drawing a compact blaster from beneath his jacket. Jamila shook her head. "They'll have the landing pads surrounded by now. There's a tunnel system beneath my shop. You can wait out the attack there." As if to emphasize her point, heavy footsteps approached the shop entrance. A gravelly voice called out, "Search every building. Find the off-worlder cargo." Tessa's markings flared with sudden inspiration. "I have a better idea." Closing her eyes, she extended her telepathic awareness toward the raiders outside. Unlike her subtle influence on the patrol officer, this would require brute force, a psychic shout rather than a whisper. "Tessa, what are you—" Nadim began, but she raised a hand to silence him. Her markings blazed with blinding intensity as she projected a single overwhelming sensation. Fear. Pure primal terror cascaded from her mind, targeting the raiders with precision. Outside, the attackers began screaming. Weapons clattered to the ground as they fled in panic, their minds overwhelmed by hallucinatory threats visible only to them. Tessa collapsed to her knees, blood trickling from her nose. Nadim caught her before she hit the floor, his expression caught between awe and concern. "That was incredible," he whispered, "and terrifying." "Never seen a Lysithian defensive surge before?" Jamila asked, her voice tinged with respect. "They rarely show their full abilities. Too dangerous for them." "Dangerous?" Nadim questioned, cradling Tessa as her consciousness flickered. Jamila nodded gravely. "Such power burns through their neural pathways without proper training and barriers?" She gestured to Tessa's now pale form. "Consequences." As darkness claimed her, Tessa felt Nadim's arms tighten around her and heard his voice, suddenly, fierce with something more than partnership. Help her, whatever it costs. In the black void of unconsciousness, Tessa felt something unexpected bloom. Trust, perhaps, or something deeper, still unnamed between them, whispering like distant constellations. Part 4. Gravity's pull. Tessa awoke to the familiar hum of the Artemis's engines and the gentle pressure of a neural stabilizer against her temple. She blinked slowly, her vision clearing to reveal Nadim seated beside her bunk, his fingers dancing across a data pad. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept in some time. 3 days, he said without looking up, somehow sensing her consciousness. You've been unconscious for 3 days. She attempted to sit up, wincing as pain lanced through her skull. Her normally vibrant lavender skin appeared ashen, and her bioluminescent markings pulsed weakly. The raiders? She asked, her voice hoarse. Gone. Your intervention scattered them completely. Nadim set aside the data pad and finally met her gaze. Jamila says you nearly killed yourself. Tessa's vertical pupils contracted in the dim light. Mass projection without proper barriers is dangerous for my kind. I knew the risk. Yet you took it anyway. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before, anger mixed with something deeper. Why? They would have killed us, she stated simply. And I couldn't let that happen to you. The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Nadim reached for a water flask and helped her drink, his touch gentler than necessary. Jamila implanted temporary neural dampeners, he explained, gesturing to the device at her temple. They'll prevent telepathic overexertion while you heal. He hesitated. She altered your appearance as planned. Tessa raised a hand to her face, feeling unfamiliar contours. How different am I? Nadim passed her a small mirror. Her silver blue eyes remained the same, but her facial structure had subtly shifted. Cheekbones higher, jaw more angular. Most striking was the change to her bioluminescent markings, now appearing as delicate silver tattoos that followed new patterns across her skin. The markings will still glow when you use your abilities, Nadim explained, but their pattern is unrecognizable from Alliance records. Your biometric signature has been altered as well. You completed the trade while I was unconscious. Tessa asked, setting aside the mirror. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Without your telepathic assistance, I had to rely on old-fashioned negotiation skills. We got a fair price, though not as advantageous as it might have been. Where are we headed now? Helios Station. It's a research outpost in neutral space, safer than most places. Nadim stood and moved toward the cabin door. You should rest more. We'll arrive in about 14 hours. Nadim, Tessa called as he reached the threshold. Thank you for not abandoning me. You could have. It would have been logical. He paused, his back to her. There was never a choice to make. The next week passed in a comfortable routine as Tessa regained her strength. Nadim insisted she limit physical activity, but welcomed her strategic input as they planned future trading routes. Their conversations grew increasingly personal during the long hours of hyperspace travel. You never speak of family, Tessa observed, one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley. Nadim's expression closed slightly. There's little to tell. My parents died in the Nefarian drought. I was raised in state facilities until I was old enough to work the cargo docks. Tessa sensed the emotional wall he'd constructed, but pressed gently. And no one since? No connections? Attachments are luxuries in my profession, he replied, his tone deliberately light. What about you? Your people are known for their community. Bonds. Pain flickered across Tessa's features. My telepathic abilities manifested later than most Lysithians, and more powerfully. It made integration difficult. When traders came offering off-world opportunities, I was eager to leave. Her silver-blue eyes darkened with memory. They sold me at the first cross-system auction they found. Nadim's hand moved across the table, covering hers. I'm sorry. The simple touch sent warmth cascading through Tessa's senses, even with her abilities dampened. She turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his, watching his expression carefully. I can feel your conflict, she murmured. Even with the dampeners. Nadim didn't pull away, but his gaze dropped. We began as a business arrangement, Tessa. I don't want you to feel obligated. Obligation is not what I feel, she whispered, her markings faintly glimmering despite the suppressors. The proximity alert blared before either could speak further, shattering the moment. Nadim rushed to the cockpit, Tessa close behind. We've been pulled from hyperspace, he said, scanning the instruments. Some kind of disruption field. Through the viewport, a sleek black ship materialized, its hull bearing. No identification markings. Bounty hunter, Nadim growled, initiating evasive maneuvers. High-end, judging by that ship. The pursuer matched their movements with practiced precision. A communication request flashed on the console. Artemis, came a smooth, feminine voice when Nadim reluctantly accepted the transmission. This is Valentia Corre. I believe you're transporting valuable cargo that belongs to a client of mine. I have no contraband aboard, Nadim replied evenly. My manifests are in order. A soft laugh echoed through the speakers. Not contraband, Rahal. A Lysithian female purchased illegally from Proxima Station. My client is most eager for her return. Tessa's markings pulsed with fear. Nadim's hands tightened on the controls. Your information is incorrect, he stated firmly. Scan the ship if you must. Oh, I intend to, Valentia replied. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be regrettable. The transmission cut. Nadim immediately locked down the ship's access points and turned to Tessa. The escape pod, he said urgently. It's pre-programmed with coordinates to a safe location. You need to go, now! Tessa stared at him in disbelief. You want me to leave you? I'll create a diversion. He was already moving, gathering emergency supplies. If they capture us both, there's no chance. Separated. At least one of us remains free. And if they torture you for my location? Tessa challenged, blocking his path. Nadim's expression softened. A risk I'm willing to take. Something broke inside Tessa then, a final barrier between caution and certainty. She stepped forward, framing his face with her hands. His surprise registered for only a moment before she pressed her lips to his in a desperate, passionate kiss. When they parted, breathless, she rested her forehead against his. I won't leave you, she whispered. Whatever comes, we face it together. Nadim's arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer. Together, then, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. But we'll need a plan. A very good one. As the bounty hunter's ship initiated docking procedures, they held each other in the red glow of the emergency lights, two souls caught in an unexpected gravity, falling toward each other even as danger closed in around them. Valentia Corey stalked through the Artemis with practiced efficiency, her scanning device sweeping methodically through each compartment. Two armed guards flanked her, weapons raised. Sleek and predatory in her midnight blue combat suit, she projected an aura of absolute authority. Your ship appears empty, Rahal, she said, returning to the main cabin where Nadim stood with his hands raised. Yet my scanner detects recent Lysithian biological traces. I transported a Lysithian diplomat last month, Nadim replied smoothly. Perhaps your equipment is detecting residual markers. Valentia's silver eyes, cybernetically enhanced, narrowed skeptically. "Search the cargo hold again," she ordered one guard. "Check for hidden compartments." As the guard departed, Valentia circled Nadim like a predator assessing prey. "My client is offering twice what you paid for the Lysithian. Tell me where she is, and you walk away considerably richer." "An appealing offer," Nadim acknowledged, "if I had what you're looking for." The bounty hunter sighed dramatically. "Always the difficult way with you traders." She drew a neural disruptor from her belt. "This will make you more cooperative, though considerably less comfortable." Before she could deploy the weapon, the ship's lights flickered and died. Emergency backups bathed the cabin in crimson glow. "Power disruption detected," announced the Artemis's automated system. "Core overload imminent. Evacuation recommended." Valentia's cybernetic eyes flashed with suspicion. "A desperate trick, Rahal." "Not mine," he replied, genuine concern in his voice. Something's wrong with the ship. The deck plates beneath them shuddered violently. In the cargo hold, the remaining guard shouted in alarm. "Valentina, something's down here, some kind of—" His transmission dissolved into static. The bounty hunter's composure cracked slightly. She activated her comm unit. "Report to the cargo hold immediately," she ordered her remaining guard, keeping her disruptor trained on Nadim. As the second guard rushed away, Nadim allowed himself a small smile. "What have you done?" Valentia demanded. "Nothing," he answered, truthfully. "But you might want to consider that Lysithians have abilities beyond simple telepathy." A blood-curdling scream echoed from the cargo hold, abruptly silenced. Valentia's enhanced eyes darted toward the sound, momentarily distracted. It was all the opening Nadim needed. He lunged forward, knocking the disruptor from her hand and grappling her to the floor. Despite his strength, Valentia was a formidable opponent. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, then flipped him over with practiced ease. As she reached for a backup weapon, the air around her shimmered strangely. Tessa materialized from seemingly nowhere, her bioluminescent markings blazing with unconstrained power. The neural dampener lay discarded on the floor nearby. Her eyes, now glowing with the same intensity as her markings, fixed on Valentia with terrifying focus. "Your guards are unconscious, not dead," Tessa said, her voice resonating oddly. "They're experiencing their worst fears made manifest. Would you like to join them?" Valentia froze, cybernetic eyes calculating odds. Lysithian projection abilities are limited to emotional manipulation, not physical manifestation or invisibility. "Conventional wisdom," Tessa agreed, helping Nadim to his feet. Conventional Lysithians didn't spend years suppressing their abilities until they evolved into something unprecedented. Nadim moved to the ship's controls, restoring normal power. "The core overload was a ruse," he explained. "But this isn't—" He activated a communication sequence. "Alliance Patrol, this is Trading Vessel Artemis. We've captured the bounty hunter Valentia Core, wanted in 3 systems for kidnapping and illegal trafficking." Valentia's expression hardened. "Clever. But my client won't stop. The price on your Lysithian will only increase." "About that," Nadim said, producing an official-looking document. "Perhaps you should know who her owner actually is." He handed the document to Valentia, whose enhanced eyes scanned it rapidly. Disbelief registered on her features. "This is a full citizenship certificate," she said incredulously. "Issued by the Alliance Diplomatic Corps. Completed during our stay on Callisto," Nadim confirmed. "Jamila has connections in unexpected places. Tessa is now legally recognized as a free citizen under Alliance protection. Your contract is not only unenforceable, it's evidence of attempted sentient trafficking." Tessa's markings gradually dimmed as her stance relaxed. "We anticipated someone would come looking. We've been prepared since refuge." The distant whine of approaching Alliance patrol ships filled the momentary silence. Valentia's shoulders slumped in defeat. "You've planned well," she acknowledged grudgingly, "but you've also made powerful enemies." "We've survived worse," Nadim replied, securing her hands with restraints as the patrol ship initiated docking procedures. Hours later, after Valentia and her crew had been remanded to Alliance custody, Tessa and Nadim stood alone in the Artemis's cockpit. The star map displayed multiple potential destinations, their future once again uncharted. "Where to now?" Tessa asked, her newly patterned markings pulsing gently in the dim light. Nadim studied the map thoughtfully. "The Ceres Collective is always looking for telepathically gifted negotiators, or the Outer Rim has several emerging markets that could benefit from our particular skills." "Our skills," Tessa repeated, savoring the word. She moved closer, her hand finding his. "I've been thinking about what you said before. About attachments, being luxuries in your profession." He turned to face her, his expression open and unguarded for perhaps the first time since they'd met. "I may have been mistaken about that." "You were," she confirmed, her free hand rising to trace the contour of his jaw. "Some attachments aren't luxuries, they're necessities." Nadim's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. "Like oxygen?" he suggested, his voice low. "Like gravity," Tessa countered, her silver-blue eyes meeting his. "A fundamental force, impossible to ignore once you've felt its pull." Their lips met in a kiss that held no desperation this time, only promise. When they parted, Nadim rested, his forehead against hers, mirroring their moment of decision aboard the ship when facing Valentia. "I never expected this when I walked into that auction house," he confessed. Tessa smiled, her markings glowing with contentment. "Neither did I, but perhaps some things in the universe are predetermined, written in the stars long before we recognize their pattern." Nadim reached past her to input coordinates into the navigation system. "Sirius Major," he explained. "My contact there owns a shipbuilding operation. We could upgrade to something larger. Something with 2 sleeping cabins or perhaps one larger one." The question in his words hung unspoken between them. Tessa's answer came in the form of her fingers intertwining more firmly with his as she leaned forward to engage the launch sequence. The Artemis pulled away from the Alliance patrol ship, its course set for distant stars. Inside its hull, 2 beings who had begun as trader and commodity evolved to partners and transformed into something far more profound, stood silhouetted against the vastness of space. Their separate journeys now merged into a single shared destination. As they accelerated toward hyperspace, Tessa's markings illuminated the cockpit with their radiance. No longer symbols of alienation, but beacons of a connection that transcended species and circumstance. In the glow of their light, 2 souls, who had once been lost among countless stars, had finally found their own constellation. One written not in the heavens, but in the cosmic certainty of hearts aligned across the infinite universe.